I wish to thank all the co-sponsors of tonight's event, my colleagues from NorCal Sabil, specifically our host, St. John's Presbyterian Church of Berkeley, and St. John Presbyterian Justice Committee. Also, I want to thank Joy's Voice for Peace Bay Area, Mount Diablo Peace and Center, San Columba Catholic Church of Oakland, Berkeley Women in Black, Beit Takun, Ecumenical Peace Institute, and their representative, Mark Copeland, who's managing the Zoom tonight. Also, Oscar Ramiro and Simon Whale Catholic Workers House, Plymouth United Church of Christ in Oakland, the Jazz and Justice Church, and Christian for a Free Palestine. I also want to thank my friend, Dina Saba, who organized our Speaker Bay Area program. And I'm very, very pleased and honored that Professor Makdisi is joining us to introduce the speakers and moderate the Q&A period. Dr. Makdisi is a renowned author, scholar, and academic who focuses on the history, religion, and politics of Palestine and the Arab region. He is professor of history at UC Berkeley and is the Chancellor Chair of Palestine and Arab program also at UC Berkeley. So please welcome Professor Makdisi.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you so much, Hassan, and thank you to NorCal Sabil, and thank you to St. John's Presbyterian Church of Berkeley, and all the other co-sponsors for this event, Eyewitness Gaza, a presentation by Lieutenant Colonel retired Anthony Aguilar. I was asked to introduce, what is the official term? Mr. Aguilar, what does one say? I'm sorry.
Well, now that I'm retired, I would just be Mr. Anthony Aguilar, but I'm a retired Lieutenant Colonel.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aguilar, whom I heard for the first time on YouTube, talking about his experience with the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And it was an absolutely shocking and gripping presentation. Yes. Can you hear me now? Yes. All right. I will. And so I heard, yes, I am. I can. So I heard about Lieutenant Colonel retired Anthony Aguilar the first time on YouTube, and when I heard him speaking about his experience with the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, I was really moved by this extraordinary passion and the sheer basic witness that he provided at the time. Lieutenant Colonel retired Anthony Aguilar is a retired U.S. Army Green Beret who earned the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star for Valor. In 2025, he led security efforts for the American-Israeli outfit Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. When he realized what the mission of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was, in fact, that it was anything but humanitarian, he resigned and became a whistleblower. Lieutenant Colonel Aguilar will share his firsthand experience this evening and why he chose truth over silence, why he speaks out for justice over silence. And so please join me in welcoming Lieutenant Colonel retired Anthony Aguilar, who will speak for about 40 minutes, and then there'll be Q&A, and then I guess we'll wrap. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I wanted to start by saying thank you for welcoming me to your community and here to Berkeley. It's a privilege to speak to this community, to any community, about not only what I experienced in Gaza, but continue to spread the message that Palestinians are more than statistics and numbers. They are human beings with families and stories and children and lives. They dream our dreams. They live the same lives that we all want to live, and what's good for our children and our families. It's no different. And more so than ever, it is important that we continue to talk about what is happening, because the truth is that there is not a ceasefire. As of today, 2,000-pound thermobaric bombs continue to be dropped on Gaza, killing children, destroying tent encampments of families, not tunnels, not Hamas fighters, killing the unarmed and the non-combatant women and children. That happened as of today. It's still happening. The peace plan that has been put into effect, adopted by the United Nations as UN Resolution 2803, has no inclusion of Palestinian representation. Not a peace plan. It's the Oslo Accords with helmets. It's the Balfour Decree 2.0. It will not lead to a lasting peace. It is a United States stamp of colonialism upon the Palestinian people. And as you'll see in some of the points that I'll cover, is that you'll see exactly why I call it that. I want to give some of my background prior to going into Gaza so you understand the lens of which I saw things in Gaza. I did not go into Gaza as an activist or someone with an axe to grind or someone with a biased opinion and something to prove in terms of what I was going to see. So I joined the Army at 17. So I joined the Army before I was even old enough to vote. I was commissioned as a lieutenant from the United States Military Academy at West Point. Immediately went to combat, served as an officer, as the platoon leader all the way through battalion command. I've deployed to combat in Iraq multiple times, Afghanistan multiple times, Syria, Tajikistan, Yemen, Somalia, the southern Philippines, all throughout Southeast Asia and Central and the Levant. So when I went into Gaza, it was not my first exposure to war. It was not my first exposure to an area of conflict or death and destruction. The very first day, in the very few moments of my first time in Gaza, crossing Karim Shalom into Gaza, what I witnessed as a hardened combat veteran broke me. Mentally, emotionally, it was disturbing. And it was clear to me that Geneva Convention, laws of land warfare, laws of armed conflict, that had long departed from that long ago. This is not a war. This is genocide. This is an ethnic cleansing. This is an erasure of culture. This is an erasure of a people. This is not just a genocide, it's an ecocide. The land and how much munitions have been dropped, and it will take from now until 2050 to even clear the 550 million tons of rubble. It is an infanticide. Children under the age of 5 killed by disease, famine, killing, American bombs. There is not one bomb that Israel drops that the United States does not provide. We provide all of them. There is not one bullet fired in Gaza that the United States does not provide. There is not one mortar round, tank round, or artillery round fired in Gaza that the United States does not provide directly. Not even if there's munitions that Israel gets from other NATO allies, they're made in the United States. The United States is the sole manufacturer of many of these munitions, especially the 2,000-pound Joint Deployed Aerial Munition, or JDAM, in its thermobaric variant of a Mark 18. We provide it, knowingly. So, I recently retired. I just retired last March, so I haven't even been out of the Army a year yet, even as of today. May 13th, 2025, I received a phone call from a company in North Carolina, where I'm from, where I live, called UG Solutions. I'd never heard of them before. And they were hiring former special operations to serve as security or operations officers for this new entity called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, another organization I had never heard of before. Well, I hadn't heard of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation because it just came into existence a few months before that in February, in a very shadowy, sinister type of way. And the purpose of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was to be the humanitarian aid mechanism to replace the United Nations Works and Relief Agency known as UNRWA, under the auspice that UNRWA was infiltrated by Hamas, a claim that was later disproven by not only Israeli intelligence, but Western intelligence, Western agencies, that was not the case. However, UNRWA is still not allowed in to Gaza, and now 37 additional agencies have been banned from Gaza, to include Doctors Without Borders. Gaza is the first place on the planet that Doctors Without Borders has been banned from entering. So when you consider the crisis that continues to happen, there is not a ceasefire, and the peace agreement dictates the immediate and unrestricted flow of aid into Gaza, which has not happened. So when I got this call on May 13th, I was asked, would you like to work for us? We're going into Gaza to deliver humanitarian aid. And I asked them, well, that's a pretty tall order. I just retired. I don't really want to be away from home again. And they said, well, we really need people with your expertise to help plan this because it's from the ground, we're starting from the ground up. And I said, well, how long do I have to think about it? And this was on a Tuesday. And they said, well, we're leaving Thursday. So we need your answer by tomorrow. So I said, well, I need to think about it. So I hung up the phone, I took out a piece of paper, took out my journal, and I wrote down, what does Tony know? Well, I know that human beings are starving to death. That this population, the Palestinians in Gaza, rely entirely on what comes in from the outside, completely controlled by land, sea, or air. Human beings are starving and suffering. 2, aid is not going into Gaza. It's been stopped. That happened in late March, and here we are going into May. No aid was going in. And 3, that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, from what I was told, was going to replace the UN aid mechanism. Those are the 3 facts I knew, or the 3 things I thought I knew. And they called me the next morning, I said yes, and by Thursday I was on a flight to Virginia, and that night I was on a flight to Tel Aviv. And by that Friday I was in Israel, preparing to go into Gaza. And on the way, I kind of looked at, okay, what are we getting ourselves into? What's the plan? What do we have to prepare for? Because we were given no information. And so I looked at the UN and what they had been doing. And the United Nations operated every single day, simultaneously, all the time, 400 community-based distribution sites throughout all of Gaza. Those are what those blue dots indicate. The active operating UN sites in Gaza through multiple NGOs, not just providing food in a box, but meals, vaccinations, medical exams, everything that's needed within society to sustain yourself. Think about everything you need in your life to live, that it's reliant upon your neighbor to bring it to you. Imagine that. And then one day your neighbor just decides to stop bringing it. So looking at these, I was like, okay, well, how much aid do they bring in every day to service 400 distribution sites? And the United Nations every day from Rafah crossing, from Egypt into Gaza, and from the 4 crossings along the Israel-Gaza border, 600 trucks every single day. Every day, 600 trucks. So I thought to myself going in, well, we're gonna have our hands full. I was like, how many guys did y'all hire? Oh, we don't know how many we hired. What do you mean you don't know how many you hired? Like, in total? I was really starting to question the veracity of, are we really going to be doing this? Because this is a lot. So 400 distribution sites ran every day by volunteers and UN workers and agencies working within Gaza. Over 600 trucks a day coordinating to go in. And I started to make plans for that because I was identified to be the operations officer. And I started to make plans for how many convoys we would need every day to go in to sustain that. I was like, this is going to be a task. This is going to be a monumental task. So we land in Tel Aviv. I kind of have my plan in my back pocket on how we're going to start operations once we get settled in at Karim Shalom, which is down at the border right near where Egypt and Israel and Gaza, the border crossing in and out of Gaza there is called Karim Shalom. The border crossing that many of you heard about on the news is called the Rafah crossing, and that is the border between Egypt and Israel. That's the main border crossing gate. So the area that I'm talking about is in Israel. Rafah was completely cut off. Nothing could come in, and nothing could go out. And once we got into Tel Aviv, after we got through customs, we were met by a liaison officer from the Israeli Defense Force from an organization called COGAT, the Coordinating Office for the Government Activities in the Territories. This is an agency that exists underneath the Ministry of Defense as part of the IDF, that is a separate body that controls everything that goes in and out of Gaza or the West Bank occupied territories. This liaison meets us, and as we're traveling down south from Tel Aviv, coming south, we stopped and we were taken out to a place called Sterdot. You can Google this, you can look it up, S-D-E-R-D-O-T, Sterdot. And we were taken there and we got off the bus, and Sterdot overlooks all of Gaza. It's on the Israeli side of the border. It overlooks the entirety of Gaza. As you're standing on the hill on a clear day, you can see to the Mediterranean, you can see to the Egyptian border, you can see it all. And as we stood there, this Israeli officer explained to us, behind me is Gaza. This is where operations are being conducted. We could see munitions, bombs being dropped in the background. You could see bombs falling on Gaza. And at this site, they had installed vending machines and a picnic area and a scenic photography spot, and they encourage tourists to visit there. So when our members of Congress, and this is not conspiracy theory or Tony making this up, I was there. Our congressmen that travel to Israel as part of these trips, that's where they take them. When you see these pictures of our Congress in Israel on their trips, the picture that they all take, it's on Sterdot. They do the photo there. So they also have the binoculars like you would see on top of the Empire State Building, where you put a quarter in and you can look. And they celebrate. And people can go and watch the bombing of Gaza, the killing of children. And as I looked at it and thinking to myself, God, how are we going to sustain this humanitarian operation? I don't have any experience in humanitarian aid, and they hired me. I'm pretty sure this guy doesn't either. And this Israeli officer, he's a colonel, so respectively high-ranking, and he says, soon this will all be under our control. And he was talking about the totality of Gaza. And that gave me pause in thinking, what is this humanitarian aid really about? So I put that in the back of my head as a data point, something to think on. We entered Gaza, the very first day we entered Gaza was on the 24th of May. And I was part of a group doing a reconnaissance of the distribution sites. To give you context as to these distribution sites, secure distribution sites, SDSs. Remember I told you under the UN they operated 400 a day? Wipe that, gone. We were going to be operating 4. It would become 3, but initially 4. 4. 4. With the capacity to only bring in 12 trucks a day. So 400 distribution sites, 600 trucks, down to 4 distribution sites, 12 trucks. No water, no medicine, no vaccinations, no blankets, no fuel, no propane, no baby formula. Simply dried food, dried rice, flour, dried fava beans, and no water to cook these things with. So on the first day we were doing a reconnaissance of these sites, all of the sites looked like this overhead imagery. And we were taken to the first site. And I saw kilometers long of these fencing, of these cages, like these cattle cages. And it was explained to us, well, they'll line up here, they'll come in through here. As they come in, they'll get their food and they'll leave. And as I'm envisioning this in my head, remember I told you my background. I spent 25 years in the military as a military officer, as a planner. And looking at this, because they gave us a map, at this imagery, the first thing that stuck out to me as a military planner for 25 years was that these sites were designed as an engagement area. And if anyone understands military doctrine, an engagement area is where one force designates an area to kill the other. And the reason I say that, this looks exactly like it, because you have a point of convergence where everybody coming in to go into the place has to go out the same way. Once they're inside, the guard towers that we had didn't face out to protect us from Hamas, were pointed inward. So I saw this site and I said to myself, we cannot operate these distribution sites in the way that they're set up. We've got the whole thing covered in thousands of miles of razor wire. Utilizing razor wire to protect an aid site meant to give aid to the unarmed population is a violation of the Geneva Convention. Verbatim. Like, we can't do that. We can't. Where are the Palestinians coming from? It's like because we were in Rafah, and Rafah was leveled to the ground. There's not a building that stood. It's like, there's no Palestinians here where we're setting up these sites. Where are they coming from? Oh, they have to come from Khan Yunis or Mawasi. So they have to travel to come here through an active combat area where active fighting is going on. Yes. All right, well, rack up number 2, Geneva Convention violation right there. You cannot do that. And when I explained this to those in charge of the GHF, their response was, well, it's the IDF doing it, not us. I was like, well, Geneva Convention still applies, regardless of who's doing it. And for days, I was trying to figure out how to redesign the sites, how to redesign the distribution, thinking that this was simply a mistake. This was like this. Surely this is not intended. Stupid me. Sure, we can fix this. And as we're leading up to our first day of distribution, which was the 26th of May, we were constantly told that every Palestinian left alive in Gaza is Hamas. They're all the enemy. When we go in to deliver food, we have to protect ourselves, and man, they armed us to the teeth. Automatic rifles, machine guns, pistols, stun grenades, tear gas, riot batons, armored vehicles. I was laden with more ammunition and weaponry than I went in during the invasion of Iraq. Because they told us that they hate us, they'll take every opportunity to kill us. If we're not protecting ourselves, they'll kidnap us. And they everything we told, like, I was scared to death. On the 26th of May, we go into Gaza for our first day of distribution, and we did it at distribution site number 1. Remember, out of these 4 sites, they weren't all 4 open together. There's only one at a time. So on any given day, 1 site for everybody in Gaza. So on the very first day of distribution, Khan Yunis, the western edge of Khan Yunis along Mawasi, which borders the coastal road that goes along the Mediterranean, the Al-Rashid Road, which is called the Coastal Corridor. People showed up and lined up for days. And on our first day of distribution, we had enough food on the site for 9,000 people. And the line had grown so large that the IDF couldn't control the line. And they stampeded towards the site. 34,000 Palestinians in the southern corridor coming to this one site. And we're standing on the site, and I can't see them because there's these 20-foot berms in front of the site, but I can feel the ground shaking from 34,000 people running to get food like their life depended on it, which it did. And we only had enough for 9,000. And in that moment, because I had been told, oh, they want to kidnap you, they want to kill you, they're all Hamas, I thought that's where it ended for me. I was like, it's been a good life, Tony. Here's where it ends. But I took up my phone and I made myself a little video note to my wife and kids, like, hey, love you, it's been great. Maybe I shouldn't have taken this job. And then as 34,000 Palestinians come onto this site and getting food, I was greeted with hugs, kisses on my cheek, thank yous. At one point, I was walking backwards because as the crowd was coming in, I wanted to get out of the way, and I tripped and fell back. I wasn't pushed, I tripped and fell down, and this Palestinian man helped me up and dusted me off. And I was like, these are not the people that they said. These are children. Women and children and grandmothers and grandfathers and fathers and mothers that are starving. And I started to see that this is all part of propaganda. This is all part of a lie. What I've been told to believe is not true. These distribution sites are set up as areas to cause confusion, stampeding, chaos, control, and to shoot. The Israeli Defense Forces, they told us going in that their rules of engagement were that they fired at the crowds for crowd control. And this has been seen in thousands of videos and pictures, is that the crowd control is done by firing at the crowds. When you're firing into crowds of 10 to 20 to 30,000 people, it's a sea of people, and you think you're over here and you're shooting into the dirt over here while you're actually sending bullets into the crowd of people one berm over. You're killing people. Outside of these distribution sites, thousands of Palestinians were killed, either coming to or leaving. And what we had found was, after a few days on these sites, the numbers would get smaller. And we would ask, well, why is the population coming smaller every day? They're only getting enough food to sustain them for one meal every 3 days with the food that we're giving them. Why is the crowd getting smaller? They should be as many, if not more, each day. Well, the 3 distribution sites in the south were south of what was called the Marag Corridor. The Marag Corridor is a military corridor that was established from the coast to the border, with no Palestinians living south of that corridor. So all of Rafah, Tal al-Sultan, Abu Bakr, Rafah, gone, empty, cleared. So any Palestinian coming south of the Marag corridor, you couldn't then go back. So as Palestinian families came to get food at these distribution sites, they couldn't go home. They were sent to either the Mawasi UN encampment, the Rafah UN encampment, or the Khan Yunis encampment. And remember, the UN is no longer operating there. So you have no UN infrastructure to provide them with tents, no electricity, no running water. At this point, 90% of the population is living on or near open sewage. And as they would come south, the IDF would then move forward with, this was called Operation Gideon's Chariots. Operation Gideon's Chariots is the offensive in Gaza that culminated with Operation Gideon's Chariots 2 in the north in Gaza City last August through the ceasefire. So as Palestinians, we come south, displaced from an area and not allowed to go home, that area would then be bombed and bulldozed, section by section by section. In the time, and I was only there for 47 days inside of Gaza, 60 days total. But even in that short time that I was there, I saw all of southern Nawasi go from rubble to pounded earth. Nothing left. So I started to ask myself, we're not providing food. We're not providing water. We're not providing any type of humanitarian aid. We're making the situation worse. And this coordinated effort controlled by the IDF telling us when we could go in, what routes we could take, what site would be operating, how long we could be at the site. There would be times when we'd be going down the Philadelphia corridor, which is the main road that's along the border with Egypt, with our convoys, and we'd be told to stop. We're not going to do distribution today. So then you have thousands of Palestinians waiting outside this site that are then told, no food today. And that may have been their last hope, their last chance. When you see a father carrying their child who died of starvation, because the choice that a Palestinian family has to make is, do I stay here and starve, or do I go and get food and lose everything? Do I keep my family here and try to get food and hope to make it back? Because they didn't know at the time that when you go there, you don't come home. So it's a dilemma. And there are some families that, through this, holding on to the last bit of what they had, and by the time they get to this site, their children have died. When you see a mother dragging a wooden pallet with a rope, and her children, all of her own children, are dead, and you know that those children were killed by an American bomb or an American bullet, and you see that, you start to question humanity. What are we doing here? What is this? And what became clear to me, what I began to understand in putting the pieces together, kind of like if you'd imagine like a Quentin Tarantino movie where he starts with the end and then flashes back, like Pulp Fiction, flashes back to the movie, back to the beginning. And all these things in my head of, soon this will all be ours. 12 trucks a day. 4 distribution sites. No water. These things going through my head as data points, and I start to think, this isn't an accident. This is not a matter of poor planning or lack of capability. This is planned. This is intentional. This is the plan. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was operating in Israel, in Gaza, as the client of the Israeli government. Why did we not take in water? Because it wasn't in the contract. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation had a written contract with the Israeli government through Kogat for the delivery of this aid. And the contract dictated no water. Only this type of food. Only this amount of food. Only these times. It wasn't operationally driven. It was in the contract. A contract that the United States knowingly went into. And then further backed when the US State Department provided the GHF with $30 million for this endeavor, of which the GHF never bought any food with it. The GHF would take the food from the UN truck sitting outside the border and take it in and say, oh, look, GHF is providing food. And, no, you're not. And the UN even said, you can't take that food because that food has now expired. We're in the process of bringing in new food because the food that's been sitting here has expired. And we were taking in food where rats had eaten through the boxes, or the food had been spoiled, or at the point where flour, if it's exposed and maggots start to grow in it. This is the food we were providing. There was no intention to feed anyone. And no water. That's a point sometimes I just can't get over. No water. A basic human right. Partway through my time there, I started to ask myself, why are some of these people I'm with here as contractors not saying anything? Like every day, we'd go into Gaza, we'd come out, and as soon as I'd come out, I'd go to the operations center and be like, look at this on video. Look at this. Contractors are shooting at unarmed children, unarmed Palestinians. The IDF is shooting with machine guns into the crowd. Like how, we can't do this. And I later learned, you remember I talked about my story, how I got a phone call on a Tuesday and we left on a Thursday? I thought, man, how did they hire 300 armed contractors in 2 days? Well, they didn't. They hired 280 of them, and in the last 2 days, they had to fill the contract. So they called people to fill up the last bit of the list. But the first 282 contractors were recruited directly out of the Infidels Motorcycle Club. These guys. So the GHF had 3 companies working underneath it. UG Solutions for security, that's the company I worked for. Arkel Logistics for trucking, and then a construction company that was Israeli owned. The security company was UG Solutions. That company, the contract for Gaza, the contract lead, the guy in charge of the entire contract, was the national president of the Infidels Motorcycle Club, who then recruited 282 members of the national chapters of the Infidels Motorcycle Club. Further corroborated by what was posted on his Facebook page saying, hey fellas, want to make $2,000 a day? Dust off your old, get your gun on is what they call it, get your gun on. $2,000 a day. I had never heard of this organization. And while we're there, I asked them, I was like, I see these tattoos. I was like, who? What's with the infidels thing? Like, oh, we're the infidels. You're not in a chapter? I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not in a chapter. What is the infidels? Like, it's a motorcycle club. I'm like, you call yourselves that? Like, that's the name you've given yourselves? I was like, well, what do you stand for then? Oh, Christian Crusaders. I'm like, but you call yourselves the I was like, y'all must have read a different Bible than I did, because I would think, I was like, but if you notice in our culture, who has the infidels tattoo on his body? Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of Defense, has kafir, infidel, on his bicep. All part of the same thing. So I looked up their Facebook page, because while we were there, they took this photo. I'm not in this photo. I was not invited to this class picture. This is at distribution site number 1. They all went in there one day and they all took a photo. This was team 1, so a group of part of them. And you notice, make Gaza great again. That's not Photoshopped, by the way. That's not Photoshopped. Make Gaza great again. Fob Mar-a-Lago. And then they took this photo of themselves and put their branding on there. Skull with the Crusader cross or the Jerusalem cross. Infidels, Crusader cross, that's the tattoo they all had. And then they sold this on their Facebook page for merch. So I looked, I was like, and I went to their website to ask, what is this Infidels Motorcycle Club about? Well, you have to be a veteran to be a part of it. You have to have been employed as a military contractor. Okay, there's a lot of clubs that have similar requirements. But what really stood out to me, because I wasn't looking for it, I just saw on their Facebook page that they said celebrating Ramadan. I was like, oh, okay, celebrating Ramadan. And every year this organization gets together and they celebrate the beginning of Ramadan, as in like what tomorrow will be, with a pig roast nationwide. So this organization, their charter is to fight global jihad and to eliminate all Muslims from the earth. They follow Pope Urban I's edict of 1095, which initiated the first crusades to the Holy Land. So, in putting all this together, you have a far-right politically motivated group whose stated purpose for existing, in part, is to eliminate all Muslims from the earth, who are then given guns to go into Gaza with no accountability and no oversight, to stand by and watch the forced displacement, systematic starvation, and also participate in the shooting and killing. That's not an accident. That's not an accident. That doesn't just, all those things don't just come together by accident. And the point for me where I resigned in protest and I left, June 10th, I was in the Southern Command headquarters in Beersheba. Beersheba is a city in the Negev Desert, large city, one of the larger populated areas, not as dense as Tel Aviv, but a big city. And while we were there planning, because our fourth site up here, central site, was going to be shut down to use. The IDF were going to take over that location to stage for Operation Gideon's Chariots 2 into Gaza City. And at this point, from March until now, all of Gaza City had been cut off. No one could go in or out. Nothing was going into Gaza City at all, and nothing was coming out. The IDF notified us that we would have to shut down that site. So we're at this planning meeting, and I saw on the wall, if any of you ever been in a military headquarters, or consider it like if you ever went into your local courthouse, and they have like a map of the district on the wall, or your congressional district, see a map on the wall. And there they had a map of Gaza, and they had a map of an overlay of the operational areas that each IDF battalion or brigade controlled. And they had another map on the wall that I looked at, and I was looking at it, and I was like, that's a really weird way to look at, like, what is that? And it had golf courses, a resort, the Salah ad-Din Road carved out into a Riviera, the Elon Musk Technical Park, high-speed rail, petroleum plant, natural gas. And I was looking at this and I'm like, what is this? And it's Project Sunrise. And I thought, well, it's a pretty sick way to look at the future of an area where you're erasing the people, is to build this. But the date on Project Sunrise, the date this plan was made, phase 1 alpha through phase 4 of the redesign of Gaza, was developed by the Boston Consulting Group in 2021. So if any of you have seen that interview on 60 Minutes with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are being interviewed, and Jared Kushner is sitting there and Steve Witkoff says, Jared's put a lot of work into this. He's been working on it for the last couple years. And Jared Kushner looks at Steve Witkoff with a look on his face like, you're not supposed to say that part out loud. This is what they're talking about. Project Sunrise is not some secret CIA project you have to know a special password to look at. Look it up. Project Sunrise is the rebuilding plan that's part of the 20-point peace plan. This. Nowhere does it include Palestinian input or Palestinian sovereignty or Palestinian governance. Nowhere does it include for Palestinians to live. And right now, as we speak, Palestinians in Gaza are given a choice: leave or die. Rafah crossing, the Egyptian border, is open to one-way traffic. You get out, you can leave. What choice do most Palestinians have? So, as I saw that and I looked at this, I'm like, this is not a response to what happened after October 7th, 2023. Why was this? How do you make, that's like if you go to your neighbor's house and you say, I really want your house, and your neighbor says, well, I live here, you can't have it. And you're like, I really want it. No. Well, I'm not going to give up until I get your house. And then one day you come over and you say, I'm going to burn your house down because I want your land. And the next day your neighbor comes home and his house is burned down, and you're sitting there with a gas can and a box of matches. Oh, I didn't do it. I don't know how that happened. Oh, by the way, since your house is burned down now, can I buy your land? This was planned in 2021. How would there be an idea in 2021 to put big money into the Boston Consulting Group, US-based, of which Prime Minister Netanyahu worked for as his first job out of college? Prime Minister Netanyahu is a member of the board of the Boston Consulting Group. The Boston Consulting Group, for about $150 million, designed this plan. 2021. So in 2021, there was already a plan to rebuild the entirety of Gaza into this Project Sunrise. So in me looking at it, from everything I knew, being on the ground and seeing it and witnessing, touching and feeling it and smelling it, and now seeing this, it became very clear to me that the genocide, the ethnic erasure of a people, the forced displacement of every living Palestinian out of Gaza, or their death, is not a failure of policy or Israel's failure in fighting this war. It is intentional. It is the plan. To what end? By whom? I don't know. But it's definitely a plan. It is definitely a plan. And every day we're seeing that come to fruition. And I would ask anybody in looking at this, where would Palestinians live in Gaza? Every hospital, every school, every mosque, every church is destroyed. You know, there are Christians in Gaza. So when you think about the entire erasure of the people from this land, it's about the resources. It's about natural gas, oil, agriculture. This is some of the most fertile land in the world. And just underneath where these three sites were built down south, because I asked myself, if we only have 4 sites, shouldn't we like distribute them out across, like spread them out? Why are they all down here? Well, if you juxtapose the aerial overlay of those 3 sites to the geological survey of Gaza, you will find that that is exactly where one of the largest natural gas reserves in the region is located. And just off of that coast, something that both Egypt and Israel want off the territorial water, is some of the most accessible offshore oil in the world. You have inland oil, you have deep sea oil. Plentiful, right? We got them off the Gulf Coast of Texas, but it's far, it's deep. This oil is right off the coastline. Pump it and ship it. It's very lucrative. So, well, if Palestine exists as a state, well, that'll be their territorial water. That'll be their oil to nationalize. We can't have that. From my perspective in putting the pieces together, and again, remember, I stepped into this as a military officer that has fought with boots on the ground, these feet on the ground, in every war this nation has fought in the last quarter century. Think of that. Multiple times to Iraq, multiple times to Afghanistan, multiple times to Syria, Somalia, Yemen, Tajikistan. How many of y'all knew we were fighting a war in Tajikistan? So in all these places that I had been and seeing this, none of this is by accident. None of this is simply just figuring things out as we go. It's a plan. It is a deliberate plan. To what end? I can't say that with absolute certainty, but from the plans that I've seen, it seems to me like it's conquest, colonialism, domination, and the erasure of a people to get it. And it would not be the first time in history.
Please have your question written in the card, and we will address them soon.
I thought I was beyond shocking. Thank you very much. We are passing the baskets now for your donations. Your donations will benefit Gaza, and we can accept donations in cash, in checks, and this sign tells you that checks need to be made out to Leaven, L-E-A-V-E-N, and then put in the memo, NorCal Sabile. Also Venmo, I don't know how that works, but these little things will help you, and maybe you can find an expert on that. Please be generous. I know everyone here is heartbroken and at the same time wants to do something. So this is one small opportunity to do something. I just can't, my heart is just breaking. So anyway.
Well, while cards are going around, there was a question handed to me before a question from the audience, so I can address that one while people are writing questions down. The question is, would you talk about your work from the perspective of what has been exposed by the Epstein files, that being that there appears to be a pedophilic, sadistic, if not satanic cult that has over decades, if not longer, contaminated multitudes of ruling elites in countries and institutions, including the UN, which is behind carrying out the cruel, dirty work that's destroying and even sacrificing the Palestinian people and all of humanity. So whether it's a cult or not, I definitely think that power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that when you're involving large sums of money and power, and there's impunity and lack of accountability, that evil things happen. Evil exists in that. And what we're seeing exposed in the Epstein files and in other things is that we have world leaders that are evil, just purely evil, that cannot be trusted. And I think that the work of many organizations, government and non-government affiliated, have been working on having blackmail on world leaders, because some of them you don't have to blackmail. They believe in this. Your Mike Huckabees or your Ted Cruzes, and then some are compromised in some way, financially, ethically. By some means, they're compromised. Was that a plan? Yes. You don't gain years of compromising material on folks without it being intentional. And I think that with this, are there lawmakers and are there leaders in the world that are compromised, that cannot speak out against in their, from their better angels or their better nature against what's going on? Absolutely. Because they are deathly afraid of what would be exposed. And I can only imagine how evil and deplorable that would be, considering what there is we already know. So I say this because I've been to Washington many, many times since I've returned home. I go to Washington for 1 week out of every month. I don't live in Washington. I live down in North Carolina. I go up there 1 week out of every month specifically to talk with members of our Congress, Senate and the House, Republicans and Democrats. And when I talk to them, from some I get the answer of, okay, well, we need testimony like yours to help because we're trying to pass legislation to block the bombs or allow uninhibited aid. But there's only so much we can do. And then there's a small group that I hear from, yes, we know it's happening and we support it and we want it to continue. Regardless of what the end state is, that's what has to happen. They're all Hamas. Every Palestinian is Hamas. And I'll show them pictures of these children. This child, future Hamas. What do they say? Your Tom Cottons or your Randy Fines. And the vast majority of those in the middle are, well, it's complicated. It's complicated. It's not complicated. You're complicated because you are either compromised, blackmailed, or bought. Someone has bought you. So, I mean, there's no other explanation for it. And when you ask them, can you speak out that we shouldn't be? And this was after the ceasefire when I went, we have a ceasefire now. Our president brokered this ceasefire, right? That should be bipartisan. The ceasefire says it should be a ceasefire. So why are we, the United States, every day shipping tons of offensive munitions if we're in a ceasefire? Oh, well, they need it. For what? For what? During a ceasefire, why do you need to have your stocks of thermobaric 2,000-pound bombs replenished? Why? So the members of Congress aren't stupid. That would be giving them a pass. They're not stupid. They're compromised or bought or both. And I think what we've seen coming out lately in the Epstein files and other things is that there's probably many of them that are compromised and bought, which to me, it's dangerous because then what comes next?
So, Tony, thank you for that really very powerful statement. A really powerful presentation about your experience with the so-called, even using the word Gaza Humanitarian Foundation sort of rankles because it's so obscene.
It hurts to say.
It does hurt to say it. And the whole depravity of Gaza and what's so surreal about what you described and what all of us have been seeing. I mean, you saw it up close because you were there, but the whole idea of actually seeing for the past 3 years the obliteration of a people before our eyes on our phones, everyone can see what's going on.
Yes.
And the sheer depravity and impunity and the lack of and the zero accountability for any of these sort of the murderers and the genocidaires who are doing what they're doing. It's so shocking to think about how premeditated it all is and how deliberate it is. But I guess a couple of questions, if I may, just to start off, and there are a lot of questions here. I'm not sure we can get to all of them, but one question that comes up is, before you went to Gaza, and this is based on what you said a little bit, but one of the questions here is, what did you know about Palestinians or Palestine before you set foot in Gaza? I mean, I know you said you were you said North Carolina, right? Mm-hmm. North Carolina, you just came back from tours of duty. You end up in getting a phone call about a place. What did you know about Palestine or Palestinians before you set foot there, and what have you learned since? I mean, other than the...
When I entered Israel, if you were to characterize me, day one, I would have said, I'm pro-Israel. They're our greatest ally. They're amazing. We need them. We can't exist without them. And yeah, Hamas is super bad, and it's unfortunate that civilians are dying, but that's just the way it goes. Because I believed the Western media, and I believed the lies, and I brainwashed, believed it. And then when I saw it with my own eyes, still I looked for, surely this can't be. And until it became to where all evidence presented was, yep, it's definitely this. Then I started to look into the history even more and educate myself, because while I was in Gaza, this whole idea of, well, everyone in Gaza is just a Muslim terrorist. Not true. They're Christians. At one point, Jews lived in Gaza. And this whole idea of it's a religious conflict is a lie that we've been told. Because I looked at who's in charge of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation? Who's Johnny Moore? So I looked him up. Well, he was on Trump's first term as his evangelical spiritual advisor, and he is an evangelical Christian Zionist. That's his self-title. That's his title. I didn't give him that title. Put in charge of a humanitarian aid operation with no experience in humanitarian aid? How did he get this job? I wonder. And then the primary recruitment base was an ultra-right, racist Christian biker group? What? Okay, well, data point A, data point B, and then data point D through Z, well, makes a straight line. So when it became, and again, some may see this as, well, you're just a brainwashed idiot. Fair, but it should say more to the facts on the ground that I went there not as an activist, not as a pro-Palestinian activist trying to prove my own point. The day I stepped off that bus, if you were to put me in a line, one or the other, I would have been in the pro-Israel line. And what I saw, and that it not just broke me, but it broke my paradigm of my entire 25 years of military service. Because then I had to look at it and ask, what have I been involved in? What have I been a part of? I never found any weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. There was never any evidence that the Taliban were associated with Al-Qaeda that blew up the buildings on 9/11 in Afghanistan. What are we doing? If the government is capable of lying to us like this, what else is true? Not what I've been told. So in a way, for me in my life, Gaza is the front line of humanity. Palestinians are on the front lines of humanity. And if we as a world don't stand with humanity, we are all next.
Yeah.
And I believe that.
I think Gaza is the front line of humanity, and as you've described and as everyone has seen, Gaza is also the front line of depravity in terms of what's happening there. And so I guess one question that comes up repeatedly here is, you said you served, I've got a two-part question. You served, you said, in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Tajikistan, and several other places you served. Were you it sounds like you were more traumatized by what you saw in Gaza, by the evil of what you saw in Gaza and the sheer, it's just hard to describe how overt it all is and how explicit it all is than anything you saw anywhere else. How do you compare those experiences?
I've seen a lot, and I myself have been shot and wounded in combat. And I have lost many close comrades and friends, people that were family to me, soldiers that I led, very close friends of mine that have died in these wars, that I've witnessed dying. And the reason I say that what I witnessed and what I saw in Gaza broke me is that, in the Battle of Fallujah in Iraq, destruction, bombs, people dying. But this was a war that the world was watching and recognized. This is bad. When we went into Gaza in the southern part of Rafah, which was once a bustling, beautiful city, coastal town, culture. As we were driving through Abu Bakr, which is an enclave of Rafah, as we're driving through, you can hear the voices of Palestinians trapped in the rubble crying out, who had been there for days or maybe even weeks, potentially even crying out their last breaths. Wild, feral dogs run in front of you with the arm of a child in their mouth, eating the flesh of humans. Knowing that as you're looking at this map that was provided to you, driving through Rafah, that on this map it shows the Abu Bakr Mosque, gone. Abu Bakr Butterfly School, that's their elementary level school, gone. Playgrounds, gone. Community centers, gone. Gone. Gone, gone, gone. And the people that once inhabited those are still trapped underneath that rubble. And looking at that and knowing what I've seen in combat, when you look at a combat zone like Mosul, Iraq, Fallujah, Iraq, cities in Afghanistan, Kabul, Kandahar, Raqqa in Syria, you gain an understanding of what death and destruction equals. And looking at that, and then as you look out upon the entirety of Gaza, from the north to the south, from the west to the east, and it all looks like that. Every square inch of it looks like that. There are 500,000 to 600,000 dead, buried in the rubble, obliterated by thermobaric munitions. If a 2,000-pound thermobaric munition dropped in the middle of this church right now, there would not be an atom of any of us left. What it does. Imagine that being dropped on a school. So in seeing it and realizing there's 500,000 dead, and the majority of them are women and children left to die. What are we doing? And America funded it knowingly. If any of you saw on September 3rd when I was in the Capitol and I protested to the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee and I was arrested, on September 3rd, I went to Congress and I said two things to them inside that chamber. The U.S. is complicit in a genocide. Abide by your oath to the Constitution. And I held the Constitution up, and I was tackled to the ground and dragged out of there, along with another military officer named Josephine Guilbeault, who during her time in the Army was an analyst, a military intelligence analyst. who was aware of the targeting information that the Israelis were using in Gaza, and she resigned. And I'll tell you, 2 veterans, one of which is a 25-year wounded combat veteran, was tackled and dragged out of Congress for simply saying, follow your oath to the Constitution. And not one person in the Epstein files has been charged. Think about the nature of our government.
So, Tony, what has been the response of the mainstream US media to your attempting, or you're going as a, I mean, you became a whistleblower. You basically exposed the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation for what it was. So what is the response of the main, have you had people reach out to you in terms of the mainstream media, or is it mostly on sort of alternative sites, churches, and so on?
No, I mean, when I first returned from Gaza, I immediately went to Congress to speak with them. The first, I guess, media personality to reach out to me was Tucker Carlson. And I've been on his platform twice. I've been on many, many platforms, but there's still the, the smearing, the defamation.
How are you smeared? How are you defamed?
I think there was a point where, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation put out that I had never served in the Army. Like, okay, well, that's ridiculous. That I was a bad employee, that they fired me. Like, okay, well, even if that were true, it doesn't negate the fact that there's a genocide going on and you're a part of it. Like, I mean, they were like, oh, well, he was disgruntled. Yes, genocide disgruntles me. It does. Just, I'll give they a face. The GHF and the US government can't attack the facts because now the world has seen it. The world has seen the truth. So they attack the character. We've seen this over and over and over and over again. I'm in a position that what I've experienced in my life, having been shot and almost killed multiple times, that it doesn't bother me. Like, make fun of me all you want. And I'm a Christian, I was raised in a Catholic household, and I know one thing for sure in this life is that I will die. I will leave this body at some point and meet my Maker. And when I meet my Maker and he says, the great Maker says to me, I gave you a brain to think. Why didn't you think for yourself? I gave you a mouth to speak. Why didn't you speak truth of what you saw? I gave you a conscience to feel. Why did you ignore it? I gave you a heart. Why did you not follow it? Oh, well, God, I'm really worried about my followers on TikTok, whatever it's called, the social media. Just worried about my followers on social media, worried about what my friends might think. No, because I have seen the truth. I have witnessed it with my own eyes. It was not fed to me by someone else. It was not a narrative fed to me for money or for power or, hey, say this or say that. What I witnessed is absolutely the front line of humanity. And I'll tell you right now, as a world, we're losing. And if you don't think that the tactics and the weapons and the technology that the United States is providing for the Israeli forces to use in Gaza won't come home to us, too late. The United States government is using Palantir against us. Where was that technology honed? At these distribution sites managed by Palantir. The armaments and the equipment that you see ICE agents equipped with and other federal agencies, the exact same equipment that GHF went in with off a government contract. Those dudes you saw. There are 6 individuals that I served with in the GHF as part of the Infidels Motorcycle Club that are now in ICE. They recruit from the same basis. They give them the same tactics and the same equipment. They use the same technology. They use the same vehicles. They use the same body armor. They use the same stun grenades. They use the same weapons. So if you don't think what we're seeing happening there won't come home, it's too late. It already has. Now it's just a matter of how bad it's going to get. The hope it doesn't happen ship has sailed. And I'm telling you, it can get a lot worse. It can get a lot worse. So I've seen it. I've seen it. I wouldn't be putting myself at risk if what I was speaking wasn't true. After 25 years of service, between my retirement, my disability, and everything else, I could have rode off into the sunset and not cared about anything else in the world. Focused on my family and not give a hoot about what's in the news or what's going on anywhere else in the world. But I can't. Because my children are going to live under this tyranny. Your children and grandchildren are going to live under this tyranny. I can't walk up into the attic of life and pull up the ladder and say, hey, hope you do okay down there. Can't. So I'm stepping up with the truth, and it doesn't matter what the GHF or some clown in the government says. You know, some of these guys, they say, well, you didn't do this. I was like, you're like 21, man. Like, you just graduated college. Like, don't talk to me about what war is. So I will continue to speak the truth.
So one of the questions is how do you not get completely embittered, enraged, and full of sort of fury at the injustice of it all and the hypocrisy of it all? How do you maintain in a church? You said you described yourself as a Catholic, as a Christian. How do you maintain this sense of purpose?
Well, because I firmly believe that good and good people exist in this world. I believe that what we're seeing are not natural, organic ways of humanity. We're seeing evil. We're seeing what corruption and power and blackmail and complicity and what racism and what bigotry, when they go unchecked, how that can manifest. I believe that, I mean, I've seen it, like when in Gaza, as I said, the starving families who had lost their fathers, that lost their families, mother that lost their families, not coming up to us and throwing rocks at us or shooting at us. You know how many armed Palestinians I saw in all of Gaza? None. Not one. Not one. Zero. Zero. So if they're all Hamas, they're pretty good at hiding it. Not the case, right? So I believe that the majority of the world, that there is still goodness, and this is a world and a society worth living in, but we all have to wake up to what's happening. To think that the powers that be have our best interest in mind is not true. There's three aspects of realization. There's acknowledgement. They teach this in AA. There's acknowledgement. You acknowledge a truth. Well, that your shoe is brown. I may not like the color brown, but your shoe is brown. I accept that. Or no, I acknowledge that. Then there's acceptance. Do I accept that shoe's brown? Well, I will never like the color brown, so I won't accept it. Don't accept it. Well, acknowledgement is intellect. Acceptance is emotional. And then once acknowledgement and acceptance meet, then you can move forward with truth. We're not there yet. As a world, we're still clanking on accepting a reality. And I'm here to tell you that the reality of it is, there a genocide happening before our eyes in Sudan, in the Congo, in the Western Sahel, in Gaza? Yes, 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 and yes. Is the United States, our great America, funding a large portion of it directly and knowingly? Yes, 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 and yes. There are American bombs, through American tax dollars, through American funds, killing Palestinian women and children by the thousands. Yes. That's a fact. And the sooner we accept it, the sooner we can put an end to it. And if we don't, well, it's going to happen here.
So I mean, I don't know how much more time we have, but I guess one last question or a few last questions. One is, like you've described, obviously there are good people in the world. There are good people here, obviously. You're speaking out. A lot of people are speaking out, trying to speak out. But I guess, how do you deal, Tony, in your experience with the people who are indifferent, who don't care, who are not saying kill them all like these people that you were describing in the motorcycle, whatever that motorcycle gang was called, but people who just simply don't care, indifferent, maybe colleagues of yours. How do you deal with that?
Well, sometimes I think, indifference is often the most dangerous of position. You have extremes. Sometimes you have an extreme on this end, and you're never going to convince this extreme of anything else. And you have an extreme on this end, and you're never going to convince that extreme of anything else. That's a small, small, small minority. The majority are somewhere in the middle. But that core of not caring, well, in the United States, why should the average American care about what's happening in Gaza? When I go to speak with members of Congress, and they tell me Hamas this or Hamas that, it's in my backpack, I could show it to y'all, but I have this thing now. I have a map of the region, but it doesn't have the countries' names on it. And I go up and I show them, like, point out Gaza, Congressman. Here it is, point out Gaza. Well, not even in the ballpark, not even close.
It's like Ted Cruz in the Bible.
Like Ted Cruz in the Bible, or George Bush with stalactite, stalagmite, which is which? Or Sunni, what's the difference between a Sunni and a Shia? So most Americans, nay, most of the world, doesn't care, which is why I am so committed to waking people up to the fact that you may not care right now. You may not care what's happening in Gaza or the West Bank. It's not your olive trees, not your family, it's not your culture being erased, but it will be. It's just a matter of time. Because if you're not part of that elite, we're all in danger. And I can't emphasize that enough, that I understand in this country we have it better than most. On any given day, you can be sitting on your couch, you can work from home, you can watch your favorite show, order food from DoorDash and have it delivered to your house, have your robot butler pick it up at the door and bring it to you and feed it to you. You can spend your entire day, 3 meals and work, and not leave your couch and live in the comforts of life. Why would you care about what's happening in Gaza or what's happening in the West Bank or what's happening in Minneapolis if you don't live in Minnesota? But you're gonna care. Because before it was happening in Minnesota, it was happening in New York. And before it was happening in New York, it was happening in Detroit. Before it was happening in Detroit, it was happening in Gaza. It's coming. Mark my words. I have seen the collapse of societies. We are not immune.
I guess the final question for you, Tony. Thank you again for your witness. Final question. I'm looking at this picture behind. Did you take this picture?
You can have, take it, yeah.
Did you take this picture yourself? Is this from you?
Oh,
because I'm looking at a boy. I'm looking at a boy in an Arsenal shirt. Arsenal is a football club that I happen to follow, and and this is in Gaza, and this poor boy will probably never have the opportunity to ever get out or see Arsenal in the actual, like you're saying, won't be able to live the life that all peoples deserve to be able to live with freedom.
Keep talking. I'm going to grab something real quick for y'all to show y'all to this point. Keep talking. I have it in my backpack.
Well, look, it was a question for you, though.
No, you can ask
waiting
it.
for you to come back.
No, ask the question.
All right. So the question is, and since I'd like to come back and center it on the Palestinians, are you in touch with any Palestinians, whether in Gaza or the West Bank, especially with Palestinian children?
I am.
at all? All right.
Every day.
I'd like you to end with that, perhaps.
But I want to.
And on a message of some kind of message of hope in the face of this true despair.
One of the things we had talked about, you had talked about like the smearing, or what type of smearing. So many of y'all have probably seen this. It was on Tucker. It was on other episodes that I've done about this young boy. I'll pass it around. His name was Amir. This young boy, think about it. 8 years old, no shoes, emaciated, tattered shirt and clothes. God knows when's the last time he had a meal. This is distribution site number 3. So, fact. Does this boy exist? Yes. I was there. I took this picture. Was this boy emaciated and starving and dehydrated? Yes. Did this boy walk 8 kilometers to get to this site with no shoes through minefields where tanks are rolling around? Can you imagine walking through that barefooted? His father had been killed in an airstrike. And when they were evacuated, he was separated from his mother and was living with a foster family, just a family that took him in one of the UN encampments. And the day they came to this site, he was separated from his foster parent, his foster father, because they were shot at with machine guns and they scattered everywhere. And this little boy finds his way to this site. And he doesn't get a warm meal. He doesn't get water. He picks up some scraps off the ground. And when he did, you know, when he walked up to us, you know what he did? You know why he came up to us? He didn't come up to us to beg for more food. He didn't come up to us to complain. He didn't come up to us to tell us how bad we were. He came up to say, thank you, and I love you. And he kissed the hand. In Arab culture, kissing the hand is a sign of respect. And he kissed the hand and he says, shukran, thank you. And as this little boy left, he was killed, along with thousands of others who have been killed outside of these sites. And the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation came out, and their position on this was, no, even worse. Oh, that boy doesn't exist. That didn't happen. I took the picture. I was there. It was witnessed. To disprove what happened, they even showed a video of it happening. I was like, how does that disprove it happened? Thank you for proving the point. But the depravity and the lies to tell you, don't believe what you see with your own eyes. Don't believe what you saw on the streets of Minneapolis when someone was shot in the head. Don't believe what you see with your own eyes. They're terrorists. They're terrorists. This little boy grew up to be Hamas. That was the excuse. So, this little girl, her name was Basma. This little girl, this was site 4, the northern site, one of the few days we distributed. And this little girl, by the time she got to the site, you notice she's wearing these sandals in this gravel. God knows where her parents are. And she came to this site to get food. And there was nothing left. And she walked up to me and she said, where's the food? Like, I'm sorry, there's none left. You're going to have to come back tomorrow. I was here yesterday and you said the same thing. I'm here today. I'm not leaving without food. So we don't have any. You're going to have to leave. So I had this package of cookies. I had bought cookies to give to some of the younger kids because they have nothing to eat and you want to give them some sugar or something to help sustain them or at least make them happy for a moment. And so I gave her this package of cookies and she opens it up and she starts handing them to other children. And I had a backpack, so I had some more of them, and she sees them and she's like, give me the other package. I'm like, yes, ma'am. Give her the other package, and she opens it up and she starts giving them out. And she was like, if you're not going to feed my people, then I will. And the last package of cookies I had, I gave to her and I said, take this home for your family. Take this home. And I gave it to her. And she had this, you can see she's got this purple backpack on. And she took off that backpack to put the cookies in, and she pulls out a picture. Because the IDF had started shooting at the crowd outside, and they had to leave or they'd be killed. I said, you have to go home, you have to go home. And as she's putting the cookies in her backpack, she takes out this photo, old photo. And she shows it to me. And she says, this was my home, right here. That pile of rubble, that was the mosque that I went to. That pile of rubble, that's the school I went to. Right here where we're standing, where it's been bulldozed flat to the earth, this is where my house was. And she looked at me and she said, you go home. So what sticks with me most is not the depravity and the evil. It's the spirit of Palestinians, the kindness, the love. That's human nature, not what we're witnessing. That's human nature. And when you look at this young girl and you look at this young boy I know was killed, gunned down. This young girl, I don't know if she's alive. But when you look at someone like that and you realize she's not going to live through this war. And if one side has its way, no one will live through this war. And the world sits by and watches. The truth. As a world, we sit by and watch.
God bless. Thank you. Thank you so much for the